Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Feck TV Obesity special, aptly titled Widescreen Obesity in the Media. With me, Brie Heffernan, him,
Jay Kelly,
and as always,
Chris Bennett.
Wallace Simpson, well, not so recently, but Wallace Simpson did say, "You can never be too thin or too rich." Kate Moss said, "Nothing tastes as good as being skinny feels." And Barbara Streisand said, "You can be fabulous or you can eat fried chicken." It looks like the media industry, as well as the normal people, are all obsessed with fatertainment. Chris, how do you feel?
Pissed off, frankly, Breed. Fucking pissed off.
You don't enjoy tuning into fat pageants,
Look, I'm sick of, you've got channels like Channel 4, TV3, MTV out there. All they're doing is putting out these shows, and they're freak shows. It's plain and simple. We're going back to the days of Todd Browning. That's all it is. You pay your shilling and you go and watch the fat person. You know, you've got World's Fattest Man, the woman who couldn't get out of her bed. All these shows are there for, they dress them up as scientific documentaries. They're fucking not. These shows are to make the people sat at home eating their chicken or what have you, make them feel better. They watch these shows and think, oh, I'm not that fat yet. I'm fine.
It's smugness. I love it. I go, yeah, I've only got one roll in my belly.
So you're sat in there watching these fat pageants.
Thank you for admitting that you've got that one roll in your belly, actually, Breed.
Yeah. Right.
You know, you're bonding with, you know...
But look, do you sit there and watch these things like the fat pageants that we see coming out here? Do you sit and watch those and think, actually, that's okay? Because frankly, I don't.
Well, it's unhealthy, isn't it?
It's absolutely unhealthy. And I mean, look, people have their different tastes. But I find it pretty distasteful. I find it pretty weird, and it is just freak show TV completely. And then, I mean, the worst part of it, though, is actually a show like The Biggest Loser or Fat Camp or The Swan, but The Biggest Loser in particular because it's so popular. That's one of those shows that has this sort of veneer over it saying, look at how we're helping these people. No, you're exploiting them. It's absolute exploitation TV. I mean, you've got people in a very bad situation, many of whom are clinically depressed and very lonely, and then they're just paraded out there. Not to help anybody. I mean, most of them, the statistics show, put the weight back on, but purely to be laughed at. I mean, this is horrible. And, you know, it says something pretty fucking horrible about our society that people are tuning in to watch this.
They would argue, however, that the reason we have The Biggest Loser and programs like that is to encourage people to go out there and lose the weight and not to become these people.
But if you actually watch these programs, there's generally no practical advice in there for people out there. It's extremes. They take everything extreme. It's pulling weights around a course, you know, doing these army fitness training
I know,
things.
with personal trainers and everything. I mean, like, who actually has the access to that?
Yeah,
I mean,
you
these
talk
people,
about Joe
to lose
Bloggs
their
at
weight,
home.
they actually have to take, what is it, 16 weeks off work or something like that. That is not something that pretty much anyone can do.
Do you know what I found?
People don't have the resources.
Apart from the Biggest Loser and the actual focusing on the women in the crane that have to be, the women in the seat that have to be crane lifted out of their house. If you look at like Boston Legal Law and Order, any of these programs, all the protagonists, the really effective people, the people who are good at their jobs, they're all skinny, good-looking people. It's very rare that you see an overweight person doing well in life on TV.
It's usually the fat best friend, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. But realistically, I mean, like people who are you know, quite overweight and quite obese. In reality, I mean, the OECD report that I would have mentioned in the last show, it showed that obese people earn 18% less on average. So that's a real statistic. I mean, genuinely, people with these problems, they are lonelier. You know, they don't do as well. This is the truth.
A report from Yale actually said that the negative media portrayals contribute to anti-fat bias, and bias leads to mental health and mental issues, and mental health issues leads to more weight gain. Yeah. So really, it's just a vicious circle.
It is
like a big thick donut.
It is, but the thing about it is, though, I don't want to see it go the other way, because obviously we're talking now, you've got the portrayals, you've got shows like How I Met Your Mother or Friends, where it's the sort of the bias against fat people is quite subtle. It's sort of dropped in.
Cool. It's Fat Monica and Friends.
Fat
Absolutely.
Monica
and Barney won't do a fatty.
Won't do a fatty. But the thing is, I don't want to see it necessarily go the other way. And this is where you get shows like the fat pageants, where you have these people coming on and saying, you know, I love my body and I'm getting to fulfill my dreams and all of this thing. I don't want it to go, frankly, and I might be absolutely wrong in this, but I don't want it to go to a way where you're sitting watching TV and we all accept it. It's an acceptable thing and a fine and happy thing to be morbidly or clinically obese. It's At the end of the day, it's a health risk for these people. Yes, I'm all for people having, you know, body image issues and sort of getting out there and having that, but at the end of the day, several, you know, people out there, they're killing themselves.
They are, and it shows something about the dumbness of society as well. And funnily enough, no, quite honestly, it does. It shows that people don't think about these things, that people, you know, are absolutely willing to dehumanize other people for the sake of entertainment, both in the companies, but let's be honest, it comes back to the people watching, it comes back to personal choice, it comes back to viewers. And one interesting little thing, and this just occurred to me now, if you've ever seen a movie Road Trip, there's a character in that movie, I can't remember the actress's name, but she's quite obese, and funnily enough, she died, I think it was last year. Absolutely, you remember African-American actress,
The skinny guy.
Yeah, exactly, the skinny white guy, and that was the whole gag, and to be fair, it actually was one of the funnier parts of the movie as well. But no, she died. I mean, this killed her, you know, like this is actually outside of a joke, a person died.
Safe Foods actually say that the average 14-year-old child nowadays is 3 stone heavier than its grandparents were. So it's interesting that as a society we have got so much bigger. How do you now teach modern kids to become healthy?
Well, look, I mean, we go back to the first point to begin with, that the sort of the negative bias that we see in the media needs to end. The idea that it's okay needs to be got rid of. But I think we need to go back and teach children at that age, at the younger ages, you need to go back and teach home ec properly. You need to go back and teach them how to cook. Really, all you need, 10 good recipes that will last for your life.
On schools.
5 even.
I mean, surely it comes down to the parents. You can all say the schools should teach children everything. They should teach them how to cook properly. They should teach them safe sex so they're not reproducing willy-nilly. We can become a nanny state, and we can have everything nanny state. I mean, our parents saw their parents buying fruit and veg and cooking properly, but nowadays they just see our parents chucking processed microwave food.
I'm going to state this right now. I would be all for it, Breed. I'd be completely with you and say that, you know, those parents out there that you say that might be lazy or what have you, that need to take, you know, charge of their children, need to take charge of their lives. I'm all for you on that. But the fact of the matter is that this is a problem that is acute and is happening now. And unfortunately, I think it's one of those things where, in this instance, a little bit more of the nanny state for this cause might actually be a good thing.
If trusting parents, to be fair, if trusting parents worked, we wouldn't have this problem in the first place.
I was never in a Chinese restaurant until I was 15. Like, we didn't get fast food like that. But the notion that any child nowadays would not be eating Chinese on a regular basis is just absurd.
No, but I think that the whole thing is, you know, the horse has bolted. That's gone. You can't go back from that point now. You need to work on a way that we can sort of stop it happening in the next cycle of people going into adulthood.
It's one of those cases where wealth is actually trumping health as well, I think. The price of pizzas this year is down 7% on what it was last year, whereas the price of fruit and veg is up almost 20%. So I think families nowadays, I mean, children's allowance is going down, or at least it's threatened in the budget tomorrow. All these things are going down. Raising families is getting more expensive. Schools are becoming more expensive. So maybe they're just taking it out in their food shopping.
No, look, this is trampled out every single time. When the budgets come out, when people are talking about this, they say, well, the poor people, they can't afford to cook. It's bollocks. Frankly, if you go out there and you go to Lidl or you go to Aldi or you go to one of the smaller supermarkets, you can buy fruit and veg, a couple of things that can cook a meal that will last 3 or 4 days if you freeze it, a couple of weeks, for a cheap amount of money. Still less, frankly, if you do it right, less than fast food every single day.
I think he has a point. I do think that maybe a little bit more creativity and a little bit more thought is something that's going to help. But just returning for a moment to the whole media point as well, one of the things that if you actually look at the portrayal of overweight and obese people in the media, it very much does come down to like 2 particular things. 1, object of humour, and 2 is a kind of a backup support character that even highlights further how much the main character looks good.
I wonder why is Coca-Cola invented Santa Claus. They invented the entire thing. Why is they made him fat?
Jolly fat man.
Is it
Everybody
because
knows the jolly fat man.
do we look at heavier
The
people and
jolly fat man
assume
who can
they're
laugh at
funnier?
himself. Yeah.
Peter Griffin and Family Man, or Family Guy.
Family Guy, yeah.
All these things.
Yeah,
I'm
but
sorry.
there is always the character Homer Simpson, etc. The media portrays it in either one or two ways, and the jolly fat man has always been there since the start.
The jolly fat man makes people feel happy. The jolly fat man is almost like he's the guy who gives you the excuse to laugh at fat people.
Look, the jolly fat man allows things like the National Association for the Advancement of Fat Acceptance to be a real thing.
That is a real thing.
It's 1969. It's a real thing. That type of stuff gets allowed if you go down the route of saying, you know what, it's perfectly okay to be morbidly obese. Frankly, it's not.
No, I mean, it's unhealthy. And I mean, keep in mind as well, it affects their children. People who have these problems tend to pass it on. And it's a very interesting thing that a study was done, which I think I told you about, showing that it can be predicted at birth if somebody is going to grow up to be obese.
I find it interesting that in different cultures they admire heavier women. It's probably going to be a bit controversial, but I think in poorer countries and people who've come from poorer continents, they enjoy a bit of meat on the bones.
It was a sign of wealth, typically, back, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, absolutely, it was something that was considered a sign of affluence and a sign of wealth if somebody was larger, that kind of a way.
Whereas nowadays you look at like Kate Middleton, one of the royals over in Britain, she couldn't be any thinner if she tried to be. Same, I mean, Victoria Beckham, all these celebrities who we deem as perfect, couldn't be any thinner.
Yeah, but that seems almost to me like a psychosis. I mean, there is a kind of a balance, and certainly
but that's not healthy either, because we're saying all this obesity is unhealthy.
Absolutely.
But that's not healthy either. Maud Gonne, she used to be the most, well, apparently she was the most beautiful woman according to Yates, or was that Countess Mark?
Yeah, but no, I think it was going to Yates, and I think that he probably took it a little bit too seriously.
But these women were strong. They were the epitome of healthy. Whereas nowadays, I mean, Nigella Lawson is who I think we should be striving to be like, whereas all of society strives to be like Victoria Beckham.
Exactly. Look, at the end of the day, we're not sitting here, you know, three sort of not necessarily overweight people. We're not sitting here and saying that you know, the obese people, it's terrible and it's a horrible thing. We should, you know, get rid of them all, shove them away in camps. We're not saying that. I think what we're really trying to say is that if you're going to tackle this, if you're going to get something forward, the media needs to get off its ass and start doing something properly about it. Instead of taking the lazy option and poking fun, we need to go back and start actually promoting ways for people to get better.
But in fairness, Chris, the media is never going to do that. The media is perfectly happy to have the scapegoat fat person.
It is, as long as the viewers out there are perfectly happy to continue along with that stereotype. If the viewers change, the media will change with it.
The funny thing about it is, though, that the viewers aren't going to change, because part of what drives the whole thing is that you can have, you know, somebody there sitting at home eating, like, you know, KFC, eating McDonald's, whatever it is they're eating, and they're thinking, oh, I shouldn't really be eating this. Then they turn on the TV and they see, you know, like some woman who got so fat that she couldn't get off her couch and she grew into it. This has happened.
It's happened.
You know, this is a documented thing. And all of a sudden, suddenly they feel superior again. Suddenly they feel good again, and they're able to eat, you know, this horrible food again. They don't have to make choices anymore. And as long as it's a case that somebody worse can be found, it's just going to perpetuate on and on and on.
That's why it always goes back to education, education, education.
And also we have to remember as well that the truth of the matter is life is about consequences. Every time life is about consequences. And if you can actually just ramp up a little bit the consequences for certain lines of behavior, okay, it's not going to fix everything, it's not going to be some magic bullet that cures things, but it will draw a line. It will draw a line in the sand. But this, as I said before, this is a generational issue. This is not something that occurred, you know, overnight, and it's not something that's going to be fixed or cured or modified overnight either as well. And it is, because it's such a big issue, it's a societal issue, and it's an international issue, and it's a general issue, which means it does have to be tackled not just by government, not just by media as well, but also in terms of personal choice.
Fair enough. Well, I don't know if society is ever going to have the balls to do that to itself, but
One would hope.
For tonight, that's all we have time for, unfortunately. Join us again tomorrow for another special on Feck TV.